I found 19 incidents where there was credible evidence of mistreatment, which I also found use of inappropriate and humiliating comments against detainees. I found that medical staff did not sufficiently understand their safeguarding duties in relation to detained people.
Gosh, that's quite a catalogue.
You're not wrong there, Dame Diana Johnson. Now, those were the mild ones she said in her evidence given to the Home Affairs Select Committee on May the 1st, where Kate Eves, chair of the Brook House Inquiry, was giving oral evidence in a one-off meeting on the Brook House Inquiry. And if you're not sure what this is about, I'll leave a link in the description box for you. And also, Kate Eves will also give you some insight about it too. So hold on to your hats, my friends. This is quite the bumpy ride and tough one to listen to.
So the Brook House Inquiry lasted for just to give a little bit of context, just under 4 years. We heard from 101 witnesses, reviewed both undercover and body-worn camera footage, all of which is still available on our website if any committee members would like to familiarise themselves with that. Took reports from 3 expert witnesses and produced an over 700-page report. The headline, I suppose, that the committee will want to be aware of is that looking at the 5-month period of what was happening at Brook House, and this was the period from April to August 2017, I found 19 incidents where there was credible evidence of mistreatment, which I found to be capable of amounting to mistreatment which is contrary to Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The reason that the wording is the way that it is because you will no doubt be aware that Section 2 of the Inquiries Act means that it is not the responsibility of a statutory inquiry to find either civil or criminal liability. So that wording is very deliberately crafted to reflect that. But nonetheless, 19 serious incidents of mistreatment. Just to give you a flavour of what that included, there were 10 instances of inappropriate use of force on detainees. Force was used on naked or near naked detainees, which I found to be humiliating. Unnecessary pain was used in a number of instances during use of force incidents. Dangerous restraint technique was used several times. This is a restraint technique which had been previously associated with the death by asphyxiation of Jimmy Mabenga, who was also in immigration detention. I also found use of inappropriate and humiliating comments against detainees during active suicide attempts, homophobic comments being used towards detainees, and initially failing to help a detainee following a suicide attempt when he was lying on the floor with a ligature around his neck. So aside from the 19 incidents, I found that there were a combination of issues which, when woven together, constituted a toxic culture which meant that mistreatment was more likely to happen. I made 33 recommendations, 31 of those for government, and those recommendations covered a variety of different issues. So I'll whiz through them very quickly, if that's helpful. I found the physical environment to be entirely unsuitable for detaining people for anything other than a short period of time. Brook House is, as you will know from having visited, is a building that's designed to the specification of a Category B prison. Coupled with that harsh physical environment and the indefinite nature of detention, which caused, I found, anxiety and uncertainty and distress for detained people, I made a recommendation that there should be a 28-day time limit on detention in such environments. I found that far too often there was a failure to follow the government's own rules around safeguarding and protecting particularly the most vulnerable people in detention, and I'm very happy to talk in more detail later on about those specific rules, but they relate to people who are particularly vulnerable in terms of their mental or physical health, and also the rules around the extra powers that can be used against people once they're in detention, so such as using force against them or segregating them from the rest of the population. So I found that the overwhelming misunderstanding and disregard for those rules left already vulnerable people at an enhanced risk of harm. The committee will probably also be aware that there are high levels of mental illness in the detained population, and a significant proportion are likely to be vulnerable, acutely vulnerable, many having been victims of torture or exposed to trauma. I found that medical staff did not sufficiently understand their safeguarding duties in relation to detained people, particularly around the issue of use of force. They didn't understand their responsibilities. Use of force itself is deliberately governed by very strict rules. It should only be used as a last resort. It should never be unnecessary, inappropriate or excessive. And too often I found that it was the case that at Brook House those things were not being followed. The most serious incident involving use of force, which some of the committee may well be aware of, was an incident which involved applying pressure to the neck of a man who was highly distressed, and the footage of that incident is available on the inquiry's website. There was significant understaffing. I found that the G4S, who at the time were the contractors running Brook House, were dysfunctional as a senior management team, and too often junior staff were left to manage extremely complex and difficult situations on their own. Staff were essentially insufficiently trained, and there were too few numbers of them to deal with the very complex nature of their job. I also found that there were issues with not having developed a healthy staff culture, and actually staff were alarmingly desensitised to the distress that they were seeing around them of the detained population, and actually the lack of supervision and leadership by the senior management team left staff to develop their own inappropriate coping mechanisms and ultimately led to that malignant staff culture.
Gosh, that's quite a catalogue.
Told you it was a bumpy ride and a tough one to listen to. I find it quite mystifying that human beings can be capable of such cruelty to others, especially when they're very vulnerable. But her damning evidence of G4S was not surprising, was it? Saying their senior management team were dysfunctional, understaffed staff were insufficiently trained, and there were too few of them to deal with the very complex nature of their job. And clearly, they were more interested in profit and cared not a jot about their staff, as well as those who were being detained. But those are my thoughts. What are yours, my friends? Let me know down below, and I shall bid you farewell and take care.